Okay, thank you very much, both of you, for being here. I appreciate that. And we welcome all of you thank you for joining us, and welcome tonight to our 411 meeting. Mute her. Okay. All right, so this is taking the place of our regular 411 meetings. We are having an LCAP community meeting, and we'll talk about what that means if you haven't participated in this process before. My name is Michelle Parker. I am on the Second District PTA board, and I also serve on the LCAP task force, which is a group of parents and staff and community members in the school district who work to help put the LCAP together and inform the process. And we'll talk about that a little bit more tonight. And I am joined tonight by a couple other members of the task force who are also going to present. And I will have them introduce themselves. Before I turn over to them, my background here in the district is I am a parent. I have 3 kids who've been in our schools since kindergarten. My oldest 2 are now in college, and my youngest is a junior in high school at Lowell. And so, Lainey, do you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Lainey Matomedy. I have 2 kids in the district who started at an early education center. We've been at 2 different elementary schools, middle school, and my son just went through the high school lottery process. So I feel for any of you out there that went through that this year. Both my parents are retired LA Unified School District teachers. And I also co-chair the Public Education Enrichment Fund Community Advisory Committee. So, but I'm recently new kind of to the LCAP and have been on the LCAP task force for a little over a year. And I've come to realize how important it is. So thanks to all of you who are taking time out of your evening to be here with us. And I'll hand it over to LaToya.
Hey y'all, hey. So I am 3rd generation SFUSD myself. My children are 4th generation, even though my grandparents are Texan and Louisiana, so that's what the hey y'all, hey come from. But they go to Rosa Parks. The youngest one technically is Raphael. Well, that's the name of the early education school at the Rosa Parks campus. We're working on creating a 1 school, 1 name brand. And the other 2 are kindergartners and 5th graders at Rosa Parks. And my work with the school district has been strictly volunteer as a APAC, African American Parent Advisory Council parent leader, one of the district parent leaders, and also serve as our school site's APAC president, and then also in the early education department, the district parent advisory council, and also serve as the liaison between our PTA and our early ed department and OST program.
All right, awesome, thank you. I'm so glad to have been working on planning this this night together with both of you. So I am going to just talk a little bit about what we're gonna do tonight. I'm gonna share my screen. Let's see here. Okay. Oh, and of course, all of my notes are now hidden because I'm sharing my screen. Hold on 1 second. Okay. So, 1 second. Okay. So there's 2 components of today's presentation, and then we'll have some discussion. We're going to talk about what the LCAP is and how parents can be engaged in the process and how schools are funded. From there, we're going to launch into a discussion about ideas and priorities. We want to know what works, what will students need as they're returning to in-person learning, what logistical supports are you concerned about as we juggle the many moving pieces. We also want to know how you perceive that SFUSD is meeting its goals as a district and at the school level, as well as how you want to keep engaging in these discussions moving forward and learning about the progress on the LCAP. We're going to share a survey in the chat in a minute for you to complete before you leave tonight so that you can share your opinions about all of this. You might want to fill it out after we've gone through most of the presentation and you've been able to talk in some small groups a little bit later. So I'm going to turn it over to Lainey, who's going to give us an overview.
And actually, Michelle, I was going to ask, do you mind continuing to share your screen so I can read my notes?
I'll keep running the slides, no problem.
That would be awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So what is the Local Control and Accountability Plan, other than a mouthful? And it's often referred to as the LCAP. And it's a 3-year plan that describes the goals, the actions, services, and expenditures to support positive student outcomes that address state and local priorities. It is a required plan from the California Department of Education. Every school district has to create a LCAP. And it's the opportunity for each district to share their story of how, what, and why programs and services are selected to meet their needs, their local needs. And why we're taking the time tonight is to give you the LCAP overview, is because it's our goal to have parents understand what the LCAP is, what's required of the LCAP, and to help you become informed and ask good questions so you can provide meaningful feedback. And we want you to understand a little bit about the rules of the LCAP so you can make sure what is supposed to be covered is covered, and also generally to become a more informed participant. So next slide. See, so LCAPs, they're essentially the district's strategic plan. And they're as I said before, they're 3-year plans, but they're updated annually. And SFUSD's 3-year plan expired in 2020, but the California Department of Education extended the deadline for all districts to create a new plan by 1 year. So that's what we're in the process of doing right now. We're beginning a 3-year plan as of the fall academic year 2021 through 2024. And that little orangey yellow arrow was the interim year because of the pandemic, where all districts were just wrote a 1-year abbreviated plan to address our immediate needs during the pandemic. And if the LCAP is sounding new to you, it's because of that COVID disruption that disrupted the typical LCAP process. So we are starting it now, and we're looking forward to your input. And we are on a compressed schedule. And then we can move on to the next slide. So what is in the LCAP? This visual is from the California School Board Association, which, by the way, has really amazing resources if you're interested in better understanding the board, superintendent, and generally how school districts work. But what this visual does is summarize the 10 areas that city and county district LCAPs are required to address. So the California Department of Education sets the priorities, and the districts go through their own processes to set and finalize their own LCAPs. And then they get sent to the California Department of Education for approval. So I believe the first time we'll get first reading of the LCAP draft June 5th at the Board of Education, finalized June 22nd, and my understanding is it's sent to Sacramento by June 30th. So what are you looking at in this slide? The 8 boxes that are highlighted in white are the 8 priorities set out by the California Department of Education for all districts. And then the 2 darker ones are additional requirements that county districts have to report on because of serving foster youth and students who may have been expelled from school. We are a city and county, so we have to include all of those things in our LCAP. All right, so, and I want to point out on the, sorry, parent involvement on the middle right is a required part of the LCAP. both for inclusion in the state planning strategic plan, as well as providing input into the LCAP. So, all right, next slide. Since there's 8 or 10 different priority areas, a lot of times districts will bulk the concepts into 3 distinct categories. So if you've gone to board meetings or school site council meetings, you may hear about student achievement, school climate and engagement, conditions of learning. Those can be sort of a quick back of the envelope sort of clustering of the concepts that are in the LCAP. And student achievement, so under each of those 3 categories are the 8 priorities. They comprise the 8 priorities from the screen before. So student achievement is kind of like what you might expect, how students are doing on standardized tests, how they're doing in mastery of their subject areas for all students, including focal students and special ed students and others. Social climate and engagement focuses on parent involvement and is one of the reasons why when you attend a school site council meeting, you're asked to sign in. And when you receive the social and climate survey every year, the district really presses you on it. These are state mandated councils and surveys that require parent participation and family participation. Student engagement looks at things like attendance, how many of our students are completing high school, how are they getting access to course recovery if they need to repeat or go back and take a class. And school climate is again, that survey that we all get, and it is measured in things such as suspension rates and self-reporting from students and families about their feelings of inclusion at school. So those first 2 categories, student achievement and school climate and engagement, measure how students and families are experiencing what the district is providing for them and how they're doing with those. And then conditions of learning is really about what the district is offering. So there's what's called basic, which is like qualified teachers, standards aligned materials, school facilities being in good repair, things like adherence to state standards, including focusing on English learners and ensuring translation. And lastly, there's course access. So the state has mandated courses that need to be offered, but districts have a responsive ability to reflect the community. So you may see things like immersion programs, AP coursework offered, art and music offerings, etc. But these are categorically what must be addressed in the LCAP. And all the goals in the LCAP need to be aligned around responding to these priorities that the state has mandated. All right, and that's a lot. So thanks for bearing with me as I've conveyed a lot of information that, and I'm sure these slides will be available later if you want to take some time to look at this more closely. Or more closely. And so the next slide gets a little more headier, and then we're going to go to the fun part, which is, getting more information about community involvement. But the next slide will, that you're looking at right now, gets into what is the LCAP? What does it look like? What's the structure of the LCAP? Our LCAP is 200 pages long. And so this is the structure of how every LCAP has to be put together. There needs to be a budget overview for parents. There needs to be a plan summary. And there needs to be a description of how the district engaged the required stakeholders in the development of this plan. I'm going to scroll down to my notes because I had to make a lot of them on this. So it will then, so what you're seeing in the blue is that budget overview, the plan summary, the stakeholder engagement. And then the LCAP really starts to dig into specific goals, how success is measured, what actions are taken, and how funding will be allocated to each action, and how they're approved, how the overall plan is also specifically serving target populations, which low-income students, English learners, special education students, and the like. So what I would like to take you to, take away from what I've just covered before I hand it over to LaToya to dig more into the community feedback part, is that the LCAP is mandated, and it's meant to be the district's strategic plan and address the state priorities for public education. It's required to be updated annually, and it's required that parents and families have the opportunity to provide substantive feedback and ongoing involvement in providing input to their schools and their school district. So like school site councils, which we have not really talked about, and which isn't the subject of what we're talking about, they're also mandated by the state, and they're connected to the LCAP. So just as we're mandated to give input into the overall district priorities via the LCAP, the school site councils are your site level version of giving input into how that particular site is managing its priorities and reflecting its particular community. So I just want to point out the connection between the school site councils and their goals and how they link to the overall strategic plan of the district as a whole. So hopefully that's been a helpful overview and not too much, but we'll have breakout sessions later, and I'm happy to answer more questions there.
Stakeholder engagement in the LCAP document. So a summary of the stakeholder process and how the stakeholder engagement was considered before finalizing the ACAP should be included in the document. And then also a summary of the feedback provided by specific stakeholder groups. And then a description of the aspects of the LCAP that were influenced by specific stakeholder input. So in a school community, this could look like maybe the DLAC group, the APAC group, there may be another parent teacher organization like PTA or PTO or some other parent advisory group or advocacy group. Next slide, please. Thank you. So stakeholder engagement is essential to create an LCAP that reflects the work that we already do and what has yet to be done. Next slide. People want to see their impact. So on the left, you'll see what the community has asked for, and then on the right, you'll see how SFUSD has responded in the LCAP. So the community has asked for more support for African-American students, curriculum to support English language development for English learners, and attention on monitoring and reducing out-of-class referrals. And the district responded by identifying goals and supports for African-American students, purchasing ELD, English language development curriculum for grades TK through 8 to implement state ELD standards, and added measures and goals to reduce out-of-class disciplinary referrals. So here's the LCAP checklist for parent and student leaders. This has been very helpful to me personally in our school community, but it can be a tool for you as parents or as family members, caregivers, and also for students in terms of, how to be involved and how to inform the LCAP process at your school site level. This is a screenshot of just one of the big questions, which is, will we have more money to invest in our school? And it talks about how school funding happens. And this can generate a conversation in terms of your school's budget, how much is actually coming from the district and how much is actually coming from outside funding sources, to help you understand better how the school budgeting happens and why there may be more funds available for certain programs versus others, such as Title IX or 5, et cetera. Next slide. So the local control funding formula, LCFF, was established in 2013 in the state of California as a funding system to provide school districts with base funding as well as additional funds based on the number of low-income students, English learners, and foster care youth that they serve. So base grants, oh, wait a minute, this is on my slide. Sorry, Michelle.
No worries, you're on a roll. No worries. Yeah, it's all shared. We're all good. Yeah, so I mean, you just heard LaToya talking about the funding, the local control funding formula that California adopted, our state legislature adopted in 2013. And the LCAP came into existence as a result of this monumental shift. Instead of allocating money the way we used to through what was called categorical funds that gave school districts a certain amount of money for specific predetermined programs, the local control funding formula offers districts more autonomy and of course local control, which is in the title of the funding, over how the funds are used. And so we receive funds through 3 tiers of grants. So the base grants are a specific amount per pupil based on our average daily attendance. The supplemental grants are allocated based on the number of low-income students, English learners, and students who are foster youth and SFUSD. Those are sort of the high-need student groups that are referred to in this graphic. And then concentration grants is an additional funding that we receive based on whether or not we have greater than 55% of our student populations falling into at least one of those 3 target populations that I just mentioned: low-income students, English learners, foster youth. And with more autonomy, the LCAP, this local control accountability plan that we're talking about tonight, became the tool to describe our plans and articulate how we are using this plan to serve the distinct needs of the students in San Francisco. So when we shift from the high-level local control funding formula funding model to school allocations, SFUSD has adopted these core values that you see here on your screen for resource allocation. Though there are multiple methods of allocating money and other supports to schools, they want to lean on an underlying system of values to guide decision-making. These values are equity, transparency, flexibility, and stability. They don't always work together in perfect unison, but they help frame the conversations about changes that we want or need to make as we go through a budget development process. The primary method we use to allocate funding to schools is called the weighted student formula here in SFUSD. The premise is that every school receives a base amount of funding per pupil based on enrollment. This is pretty similar, but not quite identical to the local control funding formula at the state level. The weighted student formula really comes to life in our equity-focused approach. Schools receive additional funding based on specific student factors, leading to higher resourcing per pupil at schools that serve students with the greatest needs. This slide is a snapshot of the weights included in SFUSD's weighted student formula. The strength of each of those weights, how they're weighted, varies, but these are the characteristics that are factored into the formula for each school sites. So you can see here, so that's the grade level. So kindergarten through 3rd grade receives more funding for students' incoming proficiency in the secondary grades. If there are English learners at the school, special education, and then socioeconomic status, there are various levels of that. For instance, if students are in public housing. Okay, this is as far as we're going to go today, though, in terms of budget details. From here, we're going to shift gears a little bit. Our context right now is a little bit different than it has been over the past several years, even up to really recently. Over the past few months, we have received news of substantial financial relief from the federal and state government in the form of the relief packages and state learning recovery grant, but these funds are allocated on a one-time basis, so they'll help us cover current expenses as we discuss new investments. And what this means is that for the first time in a while, again, just right now, we're not looking at reductions or trade-offs. We're not trying to figure out how to do the same or more with less funds. We do have a longer term conversation about sustainable budgeting that's going to require significant reflection and planning but we don't right now, we don't have time to get into all of that right now in this meeting. You've heard about it probably in our other budget 101 and budget 201 meetings we had with some budget staff coming to our 411 meetings. But we do have time right now to talk about the additional needs that we want to address and support as students are coming back to school now and as we move into the next school year. So we can hold all of this and think about this moment in time that we have to try to meet the needs of our students. And we'll go through a couple of brief updates on how the district is thinking about the LCAP right now. Okay. All right. So we are just about at the point where we want to hear from you. For the new 3-year LCAP, SFUSD has been thinking about maintaining their universal goals from the last strategic plan, which was called Transform Learning, Transform Lives. You can find that on the school district's website if you haven't seen it before. Just go to the About You SFUSD page and you'll see the links. It's fairly easy to find. The intention of the goals that are defined here on the left of the slide and what they hear as priorities from the Board of Education still resonate. And they want to hold many priorities in the document, the LCAP document, but they see alignment with the desire to support focal students, emphasizing social justice and bringing families and communities into decision-making. They see maintaining these goals as a valuable way to create consistency as a starting frame, but make more updates to the actions that are nested within each goal, like Lainey was showing you in that big model slide. You know, you have to have the goal and which actions are you going to take and how much money are you going to allocate to those different activities you are taking to, that you're using to impact students. So each of those updated actions are going to speak to the value strategies and interventions that we can tailor as a district to specific student populations and reflect the priorities that are guiding zero-based budgeting. Another term we're not going to get into tonight, but you heard about it if you came to one of those budget meetings, and you might hear it talked about if you ever attend board meetings. I will note also she's attending tonight. She's not presenting tonight, but the Chief Financial Officer for SFUSD is here, Megan Wallace. And so if there are some detailed questions around the budget that that LaToya, Laney, and I aren't able to answer, we can check in with her. So when it comes to recommendations from the advisories, we do a lot of engaging with them, with the senior leadership in our school district and the central office, but they are not always making connections to the school site experience or the SIPSAs. That's the student, let's see, is it Single Plan for Student Achievement? I forget, they just recently changed the acronym for that. Oh yeah, School Plans for Student Achievement. Opportunity to see, this is an opportunity to see recommendations turn into action and feel the impact. So the last two bullets here on the right will focus more on the brass tacks of the document. So they will be working with research planning and assessment to review all of the data that we have available and align metrics to the California dashboard, the school dashboard. The last time that our district did an LCAP, the California dashboard didn't exist. I don't know if you all have seen it. It has color coded. It's like a, you can see arrows that kind of flip to see how well are you doing in each of the categories. So that wasn't around the last time we did this. And this is a great opportunity we have to try to align the metrics. Finally, they want to build transparency in the expenditure tables as they continue as a district to respond to feedback about accessibility and clarity in the budget. It's a complicated document. Doesn't always feel accessible. And so this process that we're going through right now is one way that we can try to improve that. And we will be asking for your feedback. So when you're looking at that feedback form, if there are ways that you want to stay engaged, then there's a place for you to put that. We'll share the most recent links to this document, like the most recent infographics here. But this is an infographic that shows sort of a summary of what the LCAP is. The school district started doing these a few years ago, and it's a way that you can see all of the goals in the LCAP laid out visually, where you can see the goals, who it's meant to reach, how we're doing. So like this snapshot, this is, you can see this is the 2016, 2017 LCAP. You can see that, for instance, we were looking as a district to increase social emotional learning response rates, and you can see the up arrows. And so it's just a visual way that you can digest this information, because as we mentioned, or as Lainey mentioned earlier, it's a 211-page document. It's a lot of information to get through. It's not easy. So these kinds of infographics make this information a bit more accessible to parents. So it's not always easy to find data on the district's website. There are several places you can look for it, and but you can, the document that LaToya was just referring to, that the state PTA and Ed 100 put together, that parent checklist, has a lot of really great links within it. Whereas you look at these different focus areas that Lainey was talking about, you can learn more about them on the Ed 100 website, which is super accessible, easy language for parents to understand as they understand how the education system works in California. But there are also links to where you can find data related to each of those priority areas. So where you can find whether or not, or how many teachers in your school are credentialed, for instance, or where you can find the school climate survey data. It has links, so you can find a lot of that in there. So we'll post the link to that, that checklist in a minute. And this is also good information for you to bring to your school site when you're attending school site council meetings and trying to gather data for your schools. You know, look at this, look at your own school site data as you try to evaluate how well our schools are serving our students. Okay, so with that, we have 3 questions here for discussion. We're collecting these across all of these LCAP community conversations that are happening in a few different places around the district. So we're going to divide you all into breakout rooms, and then you're going to have about 10 minutes to talk. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. Well, yeah, I'm going to stop sharing. You're going to have about 10 minutes to discuss this with 3 or 4 people. And we want you just to just play off of each other in seeing what works, what you've seen working for your child's learning and well-being over this time. Think about the student needs that are present as we return back to in-person learning, and think about logistical supports you might be worried about. And so those are going to be your main focus areas. There are some other questions you'll see in the survey that I know LaToya posted it in the chat, that you don't need to talk about those necessarily, but they're questions on how well do you think SFUSD is doing in reaching its goals, and how well is your school site doing in reaching those goals? So we just want to hear a lot from you. So let me just check the chat if there's anything. Okay, great. Oh, good, thank you. Got those posted in there. So I am going to create some breakout rooms. So we're going to do, let's see, how many people do we have? 23, so I think I'm gonna do.
Michelle, do you want to put those, or do you want me to put those questions into?
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, let's put those, before everybody splits into breakout rooms, let's put those questions in the chat so that everybody will have access to them. And then let's also post the, the survey again in the chat. Could you, LaToya or Lainey, one of you post that in the chat again so everybody has both the questions and the survey. And so you'll discuss these questions together in groups of 3 or 4. And then as you come back, like decide of maybe one thing that you want to share with the bigger group. So we'll bring you back. You can share 1 or 2 takeaways from your group. And then we'll have one final question about how you want to be engaged with this kind of process, learning about the data, learning about how the LCAP works, learning about what we should be holding the school district accountable to throughout the year. We'll ask you that when we come back. It's also a question in that survey. All right. Okay, so I'm going to do 5 breakout rooms. Okay, so you're going to see a little pop-up on your screen, and you just accept it and to go into your breakout rooms. And I'm going to send you, actually, let me just, I have to make sure, because I have before forgotten to set how long the breakout room should last. When do I do that again? Okay. Okay, close breakout rooms after, we'll do 10 minutes. Okay. Okay, all right, ready? I'm gonna send you all away. Everybody clear? If you have a question, just unmute yourself before we go and we can have you answer questions. All right, we can answer your questions.
Will you tell us one more time how long the breakout rooms are? Sorry.
Yeah, you get 10 minutes.
Okay, all right.
10 minutes, talk about these questions. You can start filling out your survey if you want to. And then when you come back and share 1 or 2 ideas that came up in your room. Okay? All right, here we go. Hey, everybody. Nice to see everybody back. Hopefully that was useful. I'm sure it was too short. Breakout rooms are always too short. You probably got just into the good stuff, right? So why don't we do this? I don't know who was in breakout room number 1, but if you want to have one person share, an idea or 2 that came up with the group, that would be great. Who was breakout room number 1? Do you remember? Here, if you don't.
I'll just say we were number 1. Oh, sorry, Sharon, go ahead.
Oh, here we go. Actually, I can tell you.
No, I was in number 4.
Number 1 was Fumie, Laura, and Maggie. Do one of you want to share an idea or 2?
Fumie has her.
Hi.
Hey.
Oh,
right.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Hi, good evening. I'm Fumie. I'm a parent of a student at Rosa Parks Elementary. It's so great to be here and participate. And one of the things that I shared was agreed that social emotional wellness is at the forefront of concerns for parents. Just speaking when every child has had a completely different experience during the pandemic. Every household is completely different, right? And so how do you, thinking about the diversity of families prior to the pandemic, that has been even more pronounced during the pandemic. And so I spoke and I said that I would really love to see the district move towards a learning method or teaching method of teaching children where they are in this present moment. I think sometimes with grading and the structure of grading and test scores, we've all probably can acknowledge that there's been some discrimination that can occur during that time, or some feelings of feeling inferior if you don't seem to appear to be as smart if you don't test a certain score in your class or in your school. I would really love to see the district bravely go to teach children where they are, do assessments, and then let children just organically learn from where they are in this moment, because to be able to move forward in the same strategy, no child left behind, and standardized tests and so forth, I feel like the gap will get larger to those type of rules when it comes to academics. And so that was my suggestion. But as a group, we all agreed that social emotional wellness is most important at this time for students, as well as teachers and just everyone in the overall community. I don't want, children are the main point of the academic community, but teachers can get burned out, and parents as well that volunteer and so forth and so on. So I just want to acknowledge that for the whole community.
Thank you, Fumie. Appreciate those thoughts, and thank you, group, for working together, Fumie, Laura, and Maggie. Okay, and I hope that you all capture your thoughts in that survey, because there is room for you to write out a little bit if you like. Room number 2 is Megan, Melissa, and Valeska. Somebody want to take that? Who's it?
We didn't pick someone.
Do you want to go? Somebody else.
I will say, like, the few notes that I wrote down, and hope one of them pops in if I miss something big that they wanted included. But some of the things that worked for us, like a positive. One person mentioned that they maybe really improved their skills at organizing and using Google tools more. So like they might not have gotten that proficient at it had they still been outside of distance learning. And maybe that can be something that's even useful for in-person learning. So that was like a positive. In terms of, we talked a lot about just how do we do measurements? So both for how do you measure any learning loss, but also how do you measure where everyone's at with the social emotional? And then once you've measured it, you know, then what are the supports that are going in for those that we were just wondering about how those possible learning loss and social emotional will be actually measured. And then we talked about with logistics. Sorry, when we talked about with logistics, it's just a key is communication. So there might be a lot of logistics and planning that's in place and it's being talked about a ton at the district, but maybe parents aren't hearing that. For example, after school, maybe there's a lot of plans already for that, but parents aren't really sure what's happening yet. Or just COVID safety. I hear a lot of parents talking about, you know, maybe they're not like reading all the science and everything, but they just have a lot of concerns about it. You know, how can we go back to school if not everyone's not vaccinated? Is there going to be hand sanitizer? If parents still want to know and feel safe about going back. So communication.
Thank you. That is a theme, I think, in every parent meeting that I've been in ever. Room number 3 was Latoya, Luz, and Suze. One of you want to share?
Latoya, do you want to go?
Sure.
Okay, I can chime in.
You guys jump in and if I miss anything too. But I think we all saw that the social and emotional was a top priority for students and their families. Someone in our group, I won't name any names, suggested like the district paying for like 30 minutes at Massage Envy for parents as a part of social and emotional wellness. But also to have an effort to re-engage students and reintroduce students and families to one another. Yes, we did kind of have back to school night virtually. And yes, they do know each other from distance learning in class, but to make that, to humanize the connections. And then social emotion. Oh, so in the fall, that the focus, at least at the beginning of the fall, should be more social emotional than academic.
Thank you. Anything that the other two want to add? She cover it.
I think she got most of it. It was good to hear that of the students who are returning right now to in-person, that everything is kind of going smoothly, and most of them couldn't think of, you know, they were worried at the beginning, and then after the first day it was like everything's fine. And one of the things that was useful was the direct communication with the teachers and them feeling secure, you know, that the teachers were reaching out if there were any issues. And I'm just going to clarify that I don't have a personal, like, because my child graduated last year, so I don't actually have a student in SFUSD right now, so I can't give that personal experience, but I have been working with some students, and so I have that viewpoint. But yeah, it seemed good. It was like everyone's happy that people are back in school.
Good, thanks.
In person, they were in school. I should clarify, back in person learning.
I know. I have to be careful not to say back in school because we've been in school all year. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all. And room 4 was Lainey, Lori, Rosa, and Sharon. Does anybody want to share from that group?
I would love for someone else to share since I talked so much. I'd love to hear from one of you, and you all had lots of good things to say, helpful things.
Okay, I'll chime in. So social emotional was definitely also a concern. Also to know where our students stand today against the benchmark of where they should be, and to have an indication of that before we break for the summer, so that if there's any suggestions on what we can do to perhaps close any gaps that have been created or probably have been created, you know, would be helpful to know. I think I haven't heard any, all our concerns are social emotional, but I haven't really heard of anybody mentioning how that was going to be addressed. And I know that at least at our middle school, they're bringing the incoming sixth and the rising seventh graders in for a step up, so that at least my son will be able to meet his classmates face to face, at least some of them, so that hopefully come August, that transition will be a little bit smoother, because I think they're kind of at that tweeny age where you don't quite know where their social emotional is and their comfort level. So that, and then also a clear-cut communication to parents with respect to what the district will be providing as safety measures in terms of what the district is going to do, and then what the responsibility of parents should be, such as the district's going to do A, B, and C, you as parents or families can do X, Y, Z, so that we're all on the same page with safety of students and staff as key.
And I'm just going to insert myself before I forget. I thought it was really interesting. We had Rosa join us. She's a Spanish translator. And it occurred to me in this that Chief Wallace, Michelle from the PAC, if you're listening, I think our translators have a lot to say about what they're hearing from parents. And I think they should be part of this process to get their input, because they have a very wide and deep lens on communities that may not be on webinars in English, although there's translation services right now, but may not be easily reached. So let's lean on them a little bit more.
Yeah, that's a great point. Actually, you saying that reminds me that Rosa has actually also given me feedback after she's been part of breakout rooms before with Spanish speaking parents. And so I think it's a great idea. Thank you all for sharing that. And then our last room was Carla, Kate, Meredith, and Michelle. Who wants to share from that group?
I feel kind of like Lainey. I talked a lot, so if somebody else wants to chime in, if not, I'm happy to kind of give the lowdown. All right, I'm going for it.
I can say some. I can do it, Michelle. You talk all the time. I was going to give Meredith or Kate a chance, but
okay. Thank you, Carla.
Again, I feel the theme is social emotional. I think it was also brought up that there are different needs at different school sites for that, and also I would think elementary, middle school, and high school, all of the wellness and social emotional is sort of different. So how would the district be meeting those needs and those goals? One of our participants also mentioned staff. Like, are you considering the social emotional wellness of the staff and what would be happening for that? And I think lastly, we brought up with working families and busy families, all of us trying to get back to some sort of a normalcy, after school programs, and would they have training and around social emotional? I'm getting a thumbs up from Meredith and a thumbs up from Kate. So I think those were our three things. Again, those were our top things. And then also just perhaps more information about the COVID safety protocols that are already in place, and what would be happening around that as fall comes into play. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it. And there are some clear themes here that it's nice to hear themes that are happening. And of course, you can share in more detail about any of these. I just posted the link to the survey again if you didn't catch it. And actually, Michelle, I'm going to put you on the spot really quickly. Because I would like to ask that if people want to share this survey link with other folks in their community, but I know the LCAP task force has a quick deadline where we're trying to pull all this feedback together and put it into a report for the school board. And so when's the last time that, when do we have to have that information by?
Ooh, I'm looking at my calendar. Yeah, so the LCAP task force and the advisory alignment group are having a joint meeting this coming Monday, the 17th from 2 to 4, and it's a public meeting. If folks are available and want to chime in, you know, just kind of hear in or be a little more part of the conversation. We're still conducting community conversations like this one. This has been a great resource of information. We will be pulling that report together starting after that meeting on Monday. So I kind of feel like Monday is it.
Okay, so let's say by Sunday.
Yeah.
So if you want to share that link with folks in your community at your schools or in parent like Facebook groups you're in or whatever, and I'll post it, all the places where you saw me post this meeting, I will post this survey in those places. But if you want to share that with others, please do, because we want to get as wide of a reach as we can with these questions. So
Michelle, before really quick, I wanted to ask, I guess I could have put it in the chat. I'm having trouble with the survey. It's like I'm an administrator when I try to fill it out.
Well, you are an administrator. That's why.
Oh,
it's okay. You just log out and then you can fill it out. So, yeah, I will be honest with you. The survey right now is in English, but the Google Translate is getting better. We did this last night. We've been putting this together. We're all like so crammed busy. So I will be totally transparent. LaToya and Lainey and I were on the phone very late last night finishing this up. So I can get it in Spanish and Cantonese. I think Google Translate is pretty good. It's probably good enough to work in this Google form, and I can add those to the form so that you can share those with all, with more people in your community. I know those languages don't hit everybody in your community, but they should hit probably a lot of them. So I can add Spanish and Cantonese tonight. So if you wait till tomorrow to share it, then it should have both of those in there.
Great. Michelle, quick question. I just pulled up the survey and I'm not an administrator, so that's not an issue. But the very first one, it asks for my answer, but it doesn't show a question.
Oh.
But that one's required. So is it just like, should I type anything in there and it'll...
Oh, you know what? That is super. Let me...
Yeah. Same for me. I was just trying to fill it out.
I think
there's no question. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe it's the name of the school.
Yeah. The school
okay.
where you're from.
Let me, here, I'm gonna, I think that's exactly what it was. Hold on. I'm going to fix it. So everybody wait a second. I'm gonna fix it while we're on. You all are so patient and lovely. So, okay. Hold on. Okay. I just fixed it. So if you refresh your survey, if you haven't done it yet, then you should have it. It should say name of school.
Done.
So if you're not affiliated with a particular school, do you not want people to fill it out?
No, you can just put what your role is. If you want to put SPEDCAC, just put that.
Oh, for the school name?
Yeah. Yeah. Whichever you prefer. Yeah.
Yeah, I just put Parent Advisory Council.
So. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's weird. Okay, all right, but I'll add Spanish and Cantonese tonight so you can share it with your communities tomorrow and be able to reach more families. So,
can I chime in with one more comment?
Yeah.
Not to make your lives more difficult, but in the grade levels, just wanted to note I have a student who is in the transition program, so is a beyond 12 special education student. So I don't know if there's to add that.
Do you want me to add other?
Yeah, that would
be good, because that could include parent alum in the house.
Okay, I just added other.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Any other comments? It was too late when we were doing this. So is there something else I missed? Okay.
I love it. Adjusting in real time. It's great. I just want to shout out you three as a team were fantastic. This was so digestible, not just for me who's even been doing this work, but others that I saw in the comments. I'm totally stealing your slides for my presentation tomorrow to the Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander Matua Pack. And just so appreciative of the support and getting the information because at the LCAP task force, it takes us all, it takes a team, and I just thank you.
Absolutely. I know we're heading here on the end of time, but I do want to just ask really quickly, this is the LCAP process, like you're hearing about it right now. I mean, how many of you, if this is the first time you've heard of LCAP or had any conversation about it, raise your hand. Yeah, like there's several people, right? Like it's been a while since we've talked about it in the district. And this is an ongoing process. And one thing that I'll send in the follow-up after this meeting is over, along with the survey, is the state PTA has put together some great resources around the LCAP. I was actually several years ago, like right when the LCAP was first adopted, the LCFF was first adopted, I was on this committee with the state PTA, and we created a whole bunch of resources. And there's one that's called Seasons of LCAP. And it talks about like, what do you want to do related to the LCAP in the fall and in the winter and in the spring and the summer, and like different parts of data you can look at, you know, how do you engage your community then? Like there's all of these different things you can do throughout the year. And it's right, it's not just about the document, it's actually about the process and about holding the district accountable to serving our students. And there are different ways you can engage with that entire idea throughout the year. And frankly, as we've mentioned throughout the night tonight, this also applies to your school site councils. Like you're developing your student plan, school plan for student success. I never can remember that. The SIPSA, and those
school plan for student achievement.
Student achievement, yes. School plan, SIPSA, school plan for student achievement. It used to be the balanced scorecard. That was easier to remember. Anyway, this should connect with that. Ideally, school, you know, SIPSAs can feed up to inform an LCAP, right? Like that's how it's supposed to work. And so it would be great for us to have these kinds of conversations in our school site councils too. And in fact, it was a little bit off on a tangent, but one of the things that I'd like to see us do in the fall is have a training on school site councils, and especially how PTAs can work with school site councils. So I'd love to do that in September. So I see some enthused faces, which yay. So we'll plan that in September. So, but are there other ways that you all would like to stay engaged with this process, this data, this like following all this? Shout out or put it in the chat in this last minute or so here. Because we want to support you to be effective advocates and for us all to make sure our kids are getting what they need in our schools. You can, if you don't have ideas right now, send them over to me or send it anybody you know on this call who said, like, there's a few of us who are on the LCAP task force. There's Michelle who is coordinating right now. You saw Latoya and Lainey. Suze is on it. Is there anybody else who's on it? I'm looking across the, Carla. And then Megan's the CFO, so she knows a little bit about money in our district. So anyway,
to add to, in the survey, there is the last question has, how do you want to track LCAP process and stay engaged? So we can capture it there as well.
Right, exactly. So, okay, well, once again, we all really appreciate you showing up, for you being here and for caring about what happens with our students in this district, for being willing to take part and share your voices, because we believe they matter. And so we will keep doing what we can as leaders in the PTA and the APAC and the PVCAC and all the CACs. We will do everything we can to make sure that parent voices are valued and included in our district. I know Megan is here and I know she cares about making sure parent voices are included. And so Megan, actually do you want to say anything before we close out?
No, I'm just really enjoying the conversation and hearing everything, and you guys presented it all so well and clearly. So yeah, just celebrating that, really appreciate it. And other than that, you know, I got crazy noise in the background here, so I'm impressed. So thank you for everything.
Yeah, no worries. And Megan gets to wear the parent hat in our district too. So, okay, well, everybody, thank you very much. Have a great evening and rest of your week. Bye.